All right, everybody. So you're here to figure out how exactly you go ahead and win $3 million in a tournament, right? Well, good news is I'm going to tell you how I did it. I don't know if you could do it, but I'm going to tell you how I did it in the super high roller ball. I should put my ring on. You know what I mean? Be like, yo, what's up? The ring's up there. It's over in the corner. Sexy. Love it. So obviously, you know, this is the super high roller bowl 7. I came second in this event a few years ago. And, you know, I won $3 million in that, but I was looking to do one better in this one. And obviously, you know, it's a deep stack tournament to start with some of the absolute best poker players in the world, right? There's only like 24 players, but every one is really, really good. Like for someone to put $300,000 up, there's a couple exceptions here and there. But for the most part, every table you're going to be at is a killer table. So part of what you do strategically when you approach something like that is this. You know, a lot of people say, like, when you're in a tournament, like, got to wait for a better spot. Got to wait for a better spot. Well, when you're playing against really, really good players, there ain't no better spot. There's rarely any better spot, right? Oh, you could wait, you know, like you do that against weak players because you can find better spots. You don't need to just gamble frivolously. But against, you know, the really best players of the world, you can't cut as many corners. So in this tournament, as I said, it's deep stacked. I think the levels were 75 minutes. You get 300,000 in chips. I think we were in, well, the first hand we want to talk about, I think we were, yeah, we're at 1 in 2,000 blinds with a $2,000 big blind ante. Okay. Yeah. Come for 5, so it's like it's hard to find a perfect balance. Yeah. This is nice.
This is pretty good. Wind up finishing at like 10:30.
11ish.
Just a limp here. A little bit surprised to see the Negreanu under the gun limp. Bit unorthodox. Fair play.
Shuffle machine is intense.
Batsiakuski not lured by the ace-4. Orpin, however, looking up at that beautiful dealer button, decides he'll slide in with the king-8 suited. Now on to Haxton, who will close the action, checking the big blind.
Bit of posturing there for Mike.
So here we are. I'm under the gun with the ace-6 of diamonds. So what do you do here? Do you fold? Do you raise? Fold's fine. Do you raise? That's fine. Do you limp? Does anybody? Should you? Shouldn't you? I did. I went into this tournament really sort of thinking about, you know, the last 30 years, poker's progression, how things have changed all the way from Doyle Brunson's Super System book. You know, in Doyle's book, if you read it, it's very, very old, but, you know, he talked about an early position, you know, you're limping with your little pairs, your suited connectors and things like that, trying to bust somebody, you know. Why I did it twang, I don't know. But so I had been limping. It's funny because somebody sent me hand histories from the World Poker Tour from year 1, and it was actually a report that I did. And each hand, I wrote 6 hands, I limped every one. So I've been limping, you know, for 3 decades on and off, right? Got away from it for the most part for the last few, you know, decade really, because most people did. So why did people get away from limping? Why is that strategy no longer considered optimal? Well, partly because if you read Doyle's book, okay, so the guy's limping with little players and suited connectors and then raising with big hands. That's not very balanced, is it, right? So if you are going to employ a limping strategy, you have to find a way to balance it. And you don't have to be perfectly balanced because people are not going to know exactly which way you lean. So what that means is you're going to have to limp with some very strong hands. Aces, kings, ace, king, queens, jacks, tens, all that stuff. You're also going to be limping with some of your weaker hands, like queen 5 suited, you know, pocket deuces, things like that. And then you're also going to have your marginal hands. So if you're doing that and you're encompassing it well, you will, you know, you will have what appears to be a more difficult range to suss out, right? Again, I don't care because you're not playing against perfect players. You're playing against humans. I don't care if you're perfectly balanced. If you lean like way strong, fine. If you lean weak, whatever. Once they figure it out or they start to notice that, well, then you might want to adjust and play differently. So all I've said is totally outside the realm of theory, right? In terms of game theory or what's optimal. It is in the streets, kind of old school exploit. Okay, and that's really what I went with for the super high roller ball. They were essentially what I did was I looked at the common practice of how human beings are employing GTO concepts. And what we know for sure is that human mind can never replicate ever what the computer does, because the computer can tabulate, you know, millions and millions and millions of different possibilities and say, okay, this one's the right one. Now, what I realized or what I knew was, especially deep stacked, 100 big blinds or more, none of these guys are spending any time or wasting any time studying strategies on GTO of like that are limping strategies. Like, how do you play against limps? And how do the ranges change post-flop when you include a small blind and a big blind that is pretty close to infinite? In the small blind and big blind, those ranges look very different. They're like, you get rid of all the good stuff, and it's everything else. So when a flop comes 10-5-3 or Jack-9-4 or whatever, jacks and fours is reasonable. Get it? See what I did there? Right. I don't know why I went straight to Jack-4. It's stuck in everybody's head. Okay, so that's a little bit of the background in terms of what I was thinking would work. And I also used some different open sizes too. I used some 3.5, 4, 4.5 in different spots in different scenarios. And I'm not going to. My wife will kill me for doing this video, by the way. She's already pissed. Don't fucking tell anybody your strategy. Shut up. I'm like, okay, so I'm not going to tell you what types of hands or how I was balancing or anything like that, or I'm not going to tell you what my ranges look like, and I'm not going to teach you that because it's very difficult to do. Even if I taught people how to do this, I think it's very, very difficult because you don't get clear-cut answers. A lot of it is going to be based on an ever-changing flow and feel for the dynamic at the table, the chip stacks, the type of players you're up against, their tendencies, their weaknesses. So you're going to ebb and flow, you're going to bob and weave. And really, the only way to do that effectively in the way that I did is 30 years of experience. Flat out. Okay, enough babble. Let's talk about the hand, right? Okay, so we limp with the ace-6 of diamonds. Ha! What the hell are you doing? So my limping range, I can even tell you what it encompasses. You know, what is it, 7-handed, I think, 6 or 7-handed? So when I'm limping, as I said, all the strong hands, all the big pairs, ace-king, ace-queen, king-queen suited, queen-jack suited, 9-10 suited, pocket threes, pocket fours, suited aces, all that stuff, right? So what do you know about my range? Not a lot. Do you? What do you know? I limped, right? So when you see a raising range under the gun, right, typically, if they're playing pretty solid, you know what that looks like. You know what that encompasses. A limping range is much wider, right? And it plays a lot differently. So I limp with the ace-6 of diamonds. Again, like I said, I was coming in with this strategy, and ace-6 of diamonds felt like a hand that fit right in, right? It's not exactly the kind of hand where you're super excited to like open for a raise under the gun this deep and get called behind or called from the big blind. Because what you'll also notice, too, is most of the players learned over the years to defend their big blind more liberally, right? Because one of the drawbacks of limping is you're not denying equity for the blind. So you're letting the blind in with 10-3 offsuits and stuff like that. And sometimes that's going to burn you. But also times it's going to suck them in, right? Like when it comes 10-7-5 and they have 10-3 and they call a bet, and, you know, and you trap them and this and that. So there's pros and cons to doing that. But again, as I said, ace-6 of diamonds, that deep against really good players. Am I super happy if I raise and the button calls or somebody else calls? Like, if the big blind calls, fine. But, like, it's not that easy to navigate necessarily. Like, you know, that flop doesn't hit a ton. I mean, you flop an ace, fantastic. You flop a flush draw, great. If you flop a 6, maybe you're in there. But most flops are not going to be, like, good for ace-6 of diamonds, right? So it's fine. Obviously, if I limp and it's, you know, a lot of crazy action behind me, whatever. I saved myself money, right? Because I don't have to, I just put in one chip rather than 2.2 or 2.5x, which would have been the open. Okay, so we limp for 2K. Orpin, he decides to call on the button. And Isaac Haxton in the big line, he checks.
Feigned, kind of thinking it over. 3 ways to the flop, 5-10, 3 rainbow. Backdoors for Negreanu and Orpin. Not a whole lot for Ike.
Now, here comes the flop. It's the 10 of diamonds, the 5 of hearts, and the 3 of clubs, and it's a 3-way pot with 9K in it. Okay, so Isaac checks. And now let's talk about range advantage, because this is a very important concept if you are going to employ a limping strategy. Understanding when and where, you know, how your range interacts with the boards, right? So on a 10-5-3, the one concern, or the number one concern of having 2 pair is Ike, right? Because he's in the big blind, and he can have 10-3 off, 10-5 off. So there's a lot of combos of that, 5-3 off, whole bunch of stuff, right? Orpin, who limped on the button, you can probably eliminate any 2-pair combo. So for Orpin, you can eliminate jacks plus, because those probably raise coming in, right? You can eliminate 3 10s. He could have pocket 5s or pocket 3s. So his nut, the only nutted hands, or really strong hands he can have, are pocket 5s, pocket 3s. Ike, realistically, I mean, maybe he can have sets here too. I'm way more likely to. Why? Because Ike's range is this, right? And within this, sets is like a very small piece of that, right? But in mine, because my range is this. I'm playing the suited aces, the suited combos, you know, the big pairs, small, all small pairs and stuff like that. Pair of threes, pair of fives is way bigger percentage of my range than it's going to be Ike's. So what does that tell you? That tells you that this. Who can have aces here? Me. Who can have kings here? Me. Jacks? Me. Pocket tens? Me. Pocket fives? Me. Sure, I can't have 10-5, or I guess I could have 3-5 if I'm playing super goofy, 3-5 suited against the weak table. But overall, this is a pretty dry board, okay? And I feel like I have range advantage, okay? I don't know that my ace high is good, but it's not really all that relevant because I can attack this board. I have a lot of 10x too, right? 9-10 suited, 8-10 suited, 10-jack suited, 10 queens. You know what I'm saying, right? So the pot is 9,000. Now, you got a lot of options here. You can go with the little rinky dink bet. You know, rinky dink, 2,000-3,000, rinky dink. You could do that. Sure, fine, go ahead. What you'll end up having happen a lot of the time is you'll have Orpin, maybe has Jack 9 of diamonds. He's going to call with the back doors. If he's got an ace 4, ace deuce, some gut shots, any pair of threes, a 5 that Ike might have, he's going to call all the really small bets, right? So because I have range advantage, typically when you have range advantage, we've talked about this in a lot of previous videos, that allows you to have the bigger sizing.
6K sprinkle employed and ridden to success by Negreanu.
So I bet 2/3 pot. I bet 6,000 here, okay? 6,000 on a board where I have range advantage. I have two opponents. Orpin has to worry about the player in the big blind as well, you know, potentially check raising. So if Orpin calls, I can already eliminate a bunch of hands from his range. He's probably not calling that size with 8-9 of diamonds or Jack 9 of diamonds. Maybe. He could still have ace 4 or ace deuce and those kind of hands, whatnot, or just any raggedy old pair. But there's going to be a lot fewer random floats against that size because the big part is because my range is the strongest by a wide margin, right? So I go ahead and bet it. And they both fold. So it's a very, like sometimes, you know, we do these videos and you see these crazy big hands with a lot of action. This is a very simple hand, but I don't know how long this video is so far, but it's long. Because I felt like it incorporates a lot of unique and different concepts. It's going to be very different from the next hand that we share, which was the big one everyone talked about. Guys, if you want to watch the entirety of this Super High Roller Bowl and a whole bunch more high-level play, you got to get yourself a PokerGo subscription. Most of the stuff you can only find on PokerGo. And I'm going to tell you what, as a study tool, nothing better.